Even though November's overall job growth fell short of expectations, President Joe Biden says November's jobs report showed stalled growth. The U.S. is looking at the sharpest one-year decline in unemployment ever. That's a big deal, folks. Let's take a look at those numbers for Biden and contextualize them for black workers. November's unemployment rate dropped from 7.9% to 6.7%. And for men over 20 years old, unemployment fell an entire point from 8.3% to 7.3%. And for black women, it fell 2 points. Big differences. Black men saw a job growth up to 6.6% and black women up 5.7%. And in November, the black unemployment rate at 6.7% is still higher than the unemployment rate for high school dropouts that fell from 7.4 to 5%. To break all of this down, joining me now is economist Dr. William Spriggs from Howard University. Good to see you. So, Dr. Spriggs, we want to have a conversation about just what these jobs numbers mean, specifically for black workers. We know that there's always been a schism between those who don't have beyond high school education and those that do. But digging into those numbers deeper, what types of jobs are black workers actually going to, both men and women? Because we still hear time after time that there are so many jobs that are going unfilled, but we're seeing that the jobs numbers for blacks specifically are numbers that are considered average or normal, back to what they were pre-COVID?
Well, we're not clear on exactly which jobs they took last month. We don't get that in the report broken down by race. But we did finally see success for black workers. Most of the summer, the black labor force participation rate continued to climb. That is, people went from being on the sidelines to actively looking for jobs. But most of the summer, that was met with frustration. A higher share of those who were trying to find jobs were ending up unemployed rather than employed. November was the break with that, where finally black workers who were out looking got hired. And in numbers big enough, as you showed, to bring down the unemployment rate in a big way. And the positive thing here is that the share employed went up. The unemployment rate went down. We've had a couple of months during the summer where the share employed was going up, but the unemployment rate was also going up. And that was the frustration that black workers were facing in terms of trying to get hired. But these numbers still show that employers are being picky. As you pointed out, the unemployment rate for high school dropouts also improved, meaning that employers were quite willing to hire people with virtually no education. But they were still more reluctant to hire black people, of course, who have much more education than a high school dropout. So the employers are still being very picky. The long-term unemployed and a high share of black workers face long-term unemployment. They've been unemployed more than 6 months. That unemployment rate is still not coming down the way we would like. That's part of the reason it's hard to get the black unemployment rate to fall even more. But if these numbers continue, then we should begin to see that even the long-term unemployed are going to finally get their turn to get a job.
And that's a very important thing that you note, because we know that within these numbers, they're not necessarily including those who have been unemployed for a year or so, unemployed during much of the pandemic last year as well. There are some differences, some variances between black men and black women in these unemployment numbers. Could you explain as to why we see some of those?
Yeah, so the unemployment rate for black men and black women aren't equal. It's much higher for black men right now. When you look at whites, the unemployment rate for white men and for white women are far more similar. This, again, is employers being picky. But it's a good thing that the share of black men holding jobs is finally showing some recovery. At 61%, it's not where we would like it to be, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. And the other good thing in this report was that while the black labor force participation rate, the share of black men actively trying to get jobs stayed flat, that this movement was out of unemployment into employment. So we still have some black men who aren't in the labor force, We know that COVID had a disproportionate impact on Black men because of the type of jobs that we have. We tend to be in frontline service providing jobs, transportation, and jobs that put us in contact with people, and so there's still a drag on participation because of the disease, and that's why we need to make sure that all Black people get vaccinated. It's the one way to fight against the virus, but it's the one way to keep yourself in the labor force.
Absolutely. And to that point, we know that there is a new variant out right now that has caused some fear amongst employers themselves, just looking at some of the numbers and not really expecting to have as many people come in, especially from some of those frontline jobs that you spoke of a minute ago. As you probably know, there was a phrase coined a few months ago called the she session, relating to the lack of women who are reentering the job force as COVID started to, I guess, somewhat be in the rearview of what Americans considered at least last year. And a lot of that was due in large part due to lack of access to childcare. That's not necessarily bear out in the numbers that we reported earlier on Black women here, even though we know that a lot of Black women are raising kids in single parent households. So it seems that there's still some workforce availability, and Black women are still somehow making this work.
They're somehow making it work, but it is still a barrier for Black women. The labor force participation rate for Black women and the share employed have been growing really well, but we know there was weakness in the child care sector. It was one of the sectors where we didn't see the kind of job growth we saw in other sectors. That is a sector that employs a lot of Black women. And child care workers also need child care for their children. Until we can get the president's Build Back Better legislation through the Senate, the nation itself is going to suffer because we as a nation are not making the public investment that other nations make in the care economy. This isn't just child care, but this is also elder care, and it's also paid leave. In the midst of this crisis, we still had a large number of workers in November report they couldn't participate in the labor market because of COVID. Either they had it or they were quarantined because of a relative had caught the disease, or they were caring for a relative with the disease. And so it's still a drag on our economy that we can't get paid leave so that women can continue to be attached to their job, to the labor force, even when they have to take these pauses for care in their family. And the United States stands out among all the nations when we look at the wage gap between men and women. The wage gap between men and women in the United States is larger than virtually every other country. Among the G20, the 20 largest economies, we're 20th. And that's because we don't have paid leave. All other countries have paid leave. And that lets women continue to be connected to their employer, not interrupt their careers every time something happens and they have to do some care work. We can't deal with that as a nation. That's not going to get us the growth that we need going forward. So without the Build Back Better, we're going to continue to see these incidences where we get bottlenecks in the labor market, something disrupts the labor market, women have to do some sort of care work, we lose their participation, we lose their productivity, we lower their wages. This is a formula for failure of our economy. So it's very important that we change the language. People should not say Build Back Better as social programs. This is the same investment in infrastructure as building a bridge or a road. If you don't have roads, I can't get to work. But if you don't have daycare, a lot of people can't get to work either. It's a necessary public investment in infrastructure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Spriggs, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you, and thanks for sharing all of those wonderful tidbits as well.
Thanks.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Once upon a time, there lived a princess with really long hair who was waiting for a prince to come save her. But really, who has time for that?
Let's go. Feeling myself. I'm feeling
She ordered herself a ladder with Prime one-day delivery, and she was out of there.
I want some hood girls looking back at it and a good girl in my tax bracket.
Now, her hairdressing empire is killing it. And the prince? Well, who cares? Prime changes everything.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?